they will price it though, because sometimes they just build towers and then it's very unaffordable for most people.
And it's Eurovision week. According to the organizers, the contest is the world's biggest live music event with some 160 million people tuning into the annual shows. Now, Canada isn't in the contest, but that hasn't stopped one Port Moody man from becoming a Eurovision superfan. Adam Faber has been watching the contest with his wife over a decade, and they decided to travel to Switzerland for the semifinals and a birthday.
I'm here because I'm turning 40 and I figured Eurovision was as good as a midlife crisis as any. It's a huge televised event. It's actually larger than the Super Bowl as far as viewership is concerned. And so we just started watching. And then there's also these kind of Super Bowl parties where people all get together for a Eurovision party and watch it all together. So the natural culmination of this is going and seeing the original party itself, which is the concert.
The final will take place this Saturday, the 17th. And that's what we have for you so far. I'm Benit Brach. You're watching CBC News BC. Stay with us. BC Today is coming up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Well, a coroner's inquest into the overdose death of a UVic student last year has just issued recommendations. CBC's Karin Larsen will have the latest for us up first. And on the open line, the downturn in Vancouver's condo market. Condos are sitting for weeks and not selling. Last week, Ready Marketing announced it was laying off a quarter of its head office staff. We'll talk to a Vancouver area realtor and former Vancouver Mayor Kennedy Stewart and ask you, have you seen the signs and what's the impact? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. In January last year, 18-year-old Sidney McIntyre-Starko died of fentanyl poisoning at her University of Victoria dorm room. Her parents raised concerns about the response of UVic campus security and how long it took to administer Narcan and CPR. The case led to an independent investigation and a broader discussion at post-secondary institutions. A coroner's inquest was also called to understand the procedural failures in the teen's death. And this morning, the jury issued its recommendations. CBC reporter Karin Larsen joins me now. Hi, Karin.
Hi, Michelle.
Can you remind us first of this very sad case surrounding the death of Sidney McIntyre-Starko?
Sidney McIntyre-Starko was an 18-year-old first-year student at UVic in December of 2024. She and two friends and a very strange story. It would take a long time to explain it. Came into the possession of a vial of drugs. Now, they say they didn't know what was in this vial of drugs, but they decided to take it anyway. So one early evening, they went into their dorm bathroom and snorted the powdery substance that was in this vial. It turned out to be fentanyl. Now, Sidney McIntyre-Starko, one of the other students, fell unconscious pretty quickly after that, and the third student phoned 911. Sidney was the one who went into the most medical distress, I guess you could call it. 911 was called, campus security attended, but Starko McIntyre did not make it. She ended up dying from the fentanyl that they had taken that night. You know, the inquest heard that this was her first time taking this kind of street drug, and it seemed to the parents that her death was not only tragic but also preventable, which is how we ended up at this inquest.
And one of the main concerns was the handling of the 911 call. We have tape of that call. I just want to give a warning that we are about to play some of it, and it may be disturbing for some. Karin, can you explain first what we're about to hear and what it illustrates?
Right, so I've edited this down, Michelle, this clip, and so one of the concerns raised was that it took 3.5 minutes from the start of the 911 call for the 911 call operator from BC Ambulance to establish the location of where McIntyre-Starko and the other student had fallen unconscious. Now, they lived in a dorm called Sir Arthur Currie Student Residence, which is on the UVic campus. It's been there since 1967, but the 911 operator couldn't locate it on her map. And so it takes 3.5 minutes to nail down where, you know, potentially the operator was going to send an ambulance. That didn't happen right away either. And it's only after 3.5 minutes that the 911 operator asked what the problem is. Now, the problem with that is someone who's overdosing on fentanyl, what will happen first is that they will stop breathing, and then they will start suffering brain damage because there's no oxygen going to the brain, and then they will die from a heart attack. Anyway, let's listen to the clip I cut of the 911 call now.
BC Ambulance, for what city?
Victoria.
What's the address?
It's Sir Arthur Currie. We live in the UVic residences.
Okay, let me just see here. I'm just looking at the residence locations here. So what is it called?
It's Sir Arthur Currie, and it's off of Lot 5.
Arthur Currie? Lot 5?
Arthur Currie.
Okay.
And
Hold on one second here. I gotta find you first. I just don't see that building on my map. Has Robert Wallace.
do you want me to respell it?
No, I just mean like I just don't see it here off of Lot 5. Maybe it's just not one of the ones labeled on my map here.
Oh.
Yeah, so Michelle, you can just hear from that the confusion. As I said, that was edited down. It took 3.5 minutes before the 911 operator asked what the problem is because she can't locate where the student residence is. As it turns out, it doesn't really have a civic address, and this is true of a lot of buildings on university campuses, that everyone on campus knows where they are, but they don't have an actual civic address. And the 911 operator actually testified in front of the coroner that on her map, all the buildings, all the resident buildings just look like gray boxes. And so that caused a delay in response for the ambulance getting there. And that could have been obviously a critical problem with the response to the overdose.
And as Sidney's parents, as I mentioned, were very vocal in their criticism. There have been changes made at post-secondary institutions. What led to this coroner's inquest?
Well, those criticisms, many of them were directed at how campus security officers responded. They were called. They did attend the scene. They do have first aid training. They do carry naloxone. But because there was 2 students who were unconscious and turning blue, we heard testimony about that, and also having seizures, which can happen in drug overdoses, they didn't immediately give the Narcan or diagnose what the problem was. It also didn't help the third student didn't immediately tell that they had taken drugs. She said when she testified that she was worried she would get in trouble. You know, that information was divulged a little bit later. But overall, what we hear in the response is just this delay in actually, you know, figuring out or responding. And so it took 12 minutes before Narcan was administered to the two students that had passed out, including McIntyre-Starko. It was probably too late at that point for her. And then it took a total of 15 minutes before CPR was started. Cardiopulmonary resuscitation, chest compressions can keep a person alive by oxygenating the blood and pumping it, you know, to some degree through the body to keep the brain alive and keep, you know, oxygen moving through the blood. But that didn't happen, and it was too late. And there was also one other issue we should mention is the ambulance did show up. It did take McIntyre-Starko to the hospital, but when she got there, they didn't know who she was. She wasn't identified. The BC ambulance attendant did not know her name. The university didn't follow through on that. So she was in the emergency department at Royal Jubilee Hospital as an unidentified person. Her mother, Caroline McIntyre, is an emergency room physician here in the Vancouver area. And she testified on the first day, and it was just incredibly heartbreaking how, you know, her daughter was essentially dead in the emergency room at Royal Jubilee, and no one knew. The family wasn't informed because the hospital didn't know who this person was, and the university didn't follow through, even though it did put out a statement afterwards that it had in fact, informed the hospital who this person, that in fact was not true. And so there was a lot of discrepancies in information around this tragic incident.
And so today, what have been the findings this morning, Karin?
Well, following up on everything we've talked about, one of them was for universities to have civic addresses on buildings to make it clearer where emergency responders can go to, and that this information should be widely shared and widely publicized on the building, within campus as well, and on maps. So that's a pretty straightforward one there. There were actually 10 recommendations in total, and they span, the target being from the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Post-Secondary Education, BC Ambulance. One of them was that there should be a timer on when calls come in to when the call taker actually gets to the issue, because 3.5 minutes, I think, as a lot of people would agree, before you ask what the emergency is an unacceptable amount of time, especially when someone's not breathing and unconscious.
We'll have much more throughout the day here, of course. Karin Larsen, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.
CBC reporter Karin Larsen. And again, those recommendations issued just this morning from the coroner's inquest looking into the death of a UVic teen at her dorm room last year. It is now 12:15. You're with BC Today. It is 12:15, and we last week or yesterday we talked to you about the ferries. BC Ferries, of course, heading into a very busy season, and we asked you what your thoughts were in terms of BC Ferries services and whether they were meeting your needs. We talked to the mayor of Gibsons, who said that although BC Ferries is saying that they will meet the demand, the increasing demand during the summer, Mayor Silas White of Gibson said, well, it also means that people who live in communities that rely on ferries are not being paid attention to. And so we asked for your thoughts yesterday. We heard a lot from people who do live in those communities, but also people saying that we chose to live here. So that is the choice that we've made, and we need not complain about the level of service. They're doing the best that they can. Well, we had some emails. James writes, beyond the need for an upgraded fleet, I think it's fair to ask why there's no SkyTrain link to Tsawwassen. Similarly, the transit service from Swartz Bay into downtown Victoria is average at best. Also, why is there no direct BC ferry service between downtown Vancouver to downtown Victoria? Aaron writes, I don't think BC Ferries meets passenger needs. There should be more done for the people who travel on ferries. Okay, and more emails as well saying we have decided to live here, and I'm just looking for that one now. But we'll get to that in a few moments, perhaps at the end of the show. Another one who echoed another emailer that we had yesterday saying we chose to live here on Vancouver Island. $12:17 now. You're with BC Today. Okay. Here's a phrase you likely wouldn't have been able to imagine, perhaps even just a few years ago. The condo market is slow. Real estate industry watchers say there are plenty of condos around, but not a lot of buyers. And just last week, Rennie Marketing announced it was laying off a quarter of its head office staff. And in a post, it said, "Yesterday is never coming back." We have a panel joining us to talk about this in a moment, and we do want to hear from you. Have you seen signs of the condo market slowing down yourself? What's the impact on buyers, sellers, and renters in BC? And what do you think should be the housing policy moving forward? Call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. CBC's Nisha Patel looked into the market in both Vancouver and the other big city in Canada, Toronto. As she breaks down why buyers have disappeared and how much worse it could get.
In Canada's housing market, condos are the weakest link. The steepest drop in sales and prices have been in Toronto. The trends in Vancouver are troubling too. Here's why.
So this is one of my listings. We've had this one on the market for just under 3 months.
Toronto real estate agent Sean Miller says new listings are piling up on the condo market. Units that once would have sold in days can now take weeks.
We've got 7 months of inventory, which is insane. And we just don't have the buyers to absorb it. We haven't seen that much inventory in 20 years.
With so many properties to choose from, buyers are looking for deals, and sellers can no longer demand the hefty prices of a few years ago.
If you're a seller and you don't have something that's amazing, it's tricky, and you've got to be realistic.
A record wave of newly built condos is also adding to supply. Nearly 30,000 units were completed last year in the Greater Toronto Area alone, and there are more coming online in 2025.
What we're seeing now with all of this supply coming to completion is actually a reflection of demand conditions that existed 2 or 3 years ago. That doesn't exist anymore.
Bank of Montreal senior economist Robert Kavchuk says the downturn is concentrated in the largest cities. Condo sales in April tumbled 30% in the Toronto region from a year ago and 20% in Vancouver.
We haven't seen sales volumes running this low again since probably the 1990s. We're pretty much at a recession in the condo market.
The condo market is being described as a buyer's market. The problem is there are few buyers to be found. From investors to homeowners, demand is disappearing. For years, investors have been some of the biggest buyers of pre-construction condos, knowing there was a steady stream of renters in the pipeline. Not anymore.
Federal policymakers have put a cap on immigration. Population growth is falling off very quickly. You have a historically high number of purpose-built rental units.
Now rents are coming down in many cities. The average rent of a one-bedroom condo in Toronto fell almost 6% in April from a year ago, and Vancouver fell more than 4%. Add on a much higher interest rate environment, and the cost of carrying the property as a rental is less appealing.
The investors are basically gone from the market right now because rather than expectations of price increases, they have to look at things like cash flow. And at these prices, it just doesn't make sense at 4% borrowing costs.
Thousands of buyers are also scrambling, facing steep losses, as their pre-sale condos purchased a few years ago are worth less than their original value.
There's projects in downtown Vancouver, pre-sold for $2,500 plus a square foot, and appraisals are coming in at $1,900. There's gonna be like a cohort of investors that are gonna be scarred for a long time. They're going to say, you know what, I'm never buying an investment condo again.
Vancouver realtor Steve Suretsky says that's essentially freezing the pre-construction market. Developers need to sell most of their units before they can put shovels in the ground.
There's no market for them. And they're having to make difficult decisions of either converting and pivoting to rental or just completely shelving the project completely.
This one is listed at 800 grand.
Home buyers, people looking for condos to actually live in, could fill that gap in demand. But many are still unimpressed with the prices and sizes available. At an average of 650 square feet, Toronto condos have been described as shoeboxes.
And what we demographically need is larger units with 2 or 3 bedrooms, and in a lot of cases, backyards.
And there's been one other wild card that's put a chill on housing.
Reciprocal tariffs.
25%
tariffs. It's a beautiful word.
Amid the trade war with the U.S., unemployment in Canada is on the rise, and consumer confidence is shaky, forcing many buyers to put major purchases on hold.
A small interest rate reduction in June could make things improve a little bit for a period of time, but then, something else could change that sentiment. We're just in this time of uncertainty right now where we just got to ride it out.
That combination of soaring supply and declining demand is putting pressure on prices. Experts say the market has shifted significantly over the past few months, and the downturn is far from over. The average price of a condo in the Greater Toronto Area came in at about $678,000 in April. That's down 16% from the market peak 3 years ago and $130,000 cheaper. In Vancouver, a typical condo is now priced at more than $762,000. That's 9% lower than in 2022.
Affordability has improved modestly, but it's still very unaffordable to the vast majority of people living here.
Economists forecast in some markets, condo prices will fall another 10% this year. That would erase most of the gains seen during the pandemic. A stark reminder that rising prices in real estate aren't always guaranteed.
That's a CBC's Nisha Patel reporting. We want to hear from you too. Have you seen signs of the condo market slow down yourself in the Vancouver area? What's been the impact, do you think, on buyers, on sellers, and on renters? And how should housing policy move forward then? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690 or email us bctoday@cbc.ca. I have two guests joining me now. Hasan Juma is a realtor with Oakland Realty in Vancouver. Kennedy Stewart is a former mayor of Vancouver and now a professor of public policy at Simon Fraser University. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Kennedy Stewart, a lot of former Vancouver mayors talking housing these days.
Yeah, right.
Just coming out of the woodwork. Your thoughts on Gregor Robertson, first of all, and his appointment?
Yeah, well, I think he's the right person for the job. It's really interesting that Gregor was probably the first mayor in Canada to kind of be hit by the wave of huge house price increases and noticed early on that we were building all condos and no rental and quickly took action to put a plan in place to kind of reverse that course. And I carried that on through my term. And now we're seeing the effects of bringing so much rental onto the market, secured market rental, a lot of it below market, which is having some impact on the prices. Although there's, as your report said, there's a lot of other factors.
Right. So this doesn't surprise you?
Well, it was what I was kind of hoping for, was that because renters were really being squeezed with high rents, but also the inability to buy anything. And so the first step was to really get the rental units onto the market, and then that would allow people to build up equity and then buy homes if they wanted to. So that was government policy, both here in Vancouver, but also at the federal and provincial levels.
Okay. And as you mentioned, a lot of different factors going in there too. And so, Hasan, what is it that you're seeing among your clients who are, I assume, buyers and sellers?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a mixed bag out there. I'm finding that there are a lot of active buyers that aren't necessarily pulling the trigger on offers. So, you put a listing out there, you price it relatively well, you have a lot of people coming to the open houses, some booking showings, but when it comes down to actually writing offers and taking that step forward. There's not a lot of urgency. There's motivation out there to make moves, but the urgency is not there to actually write an offer today. Sometimes when you see something you sell, you'll see it from a buyer that came through an open house a couple of months ago. Yeah. They come back and circle back. So relatively quiet overall, though.
And what's behind them not taking that final step then? Why don't they feel that urgency?
So a couple things. A lot of times the buyers in the market are also sellers. So they might have to downsize. They're selling a detached home. They're purchasing a condo or a townhome. They haven't sold their place yet. So they're kind of waiting for theirs to sell. Happens the other way around as well. So there's really just not a lot pushing people forward, and then amidst all the uncertainty, that gets people to take a step back. They're still viewing, they're still looking at properties, but not ready to commit.
What does this mean for people who bought pre-sale a couple of years ago?
They are struggling. Peaks of the market, and there's lots of people that purchased pre-sales at that time. They're completing now. What we're finding is not only the completion being difficult, but appraisals coming in a lot lower. So ultimately what's happening is these purchasers have to bridge the gap between their contract price and what the bank is telling them it's worth today. So sometimes they have to come with more money down. I'm getting calls, weekly basis, people willing to walk away from their deposits, just wanting to get out. Not even just selling at a loss. So it's really a struggling market, and a lot of those units, they were driven for investors and for certain types of tenants that were okay with really small units, and that market just doesn't exist now.
So, Kennedy, you said, you made efforts at trying to increase the diversity of the kind of housing that we were seeing, but we still see high rises being built. We still see those towers. Like, why has it been so slow to adjust and create that diversity?
Well, you got to think about how long it takes to build a building. A developer has to buy a piece of land, put plans together, take it to city council, get approved, get it built. And that can take anywhere.
And are they motivated?
Well, not anymore, but the stuff that's in the pipeline, that's half built or has been started or approved, it's still all coming on the market. And,
right.
And so, there's about $1 trillion worth of real estate just in the city of Vancouver, right? That is a huge market. That's just in one city. And so you think about how these impacts hit this just one market. It's really hard to predict. Governments are slow to react, as are developers who depend so much on these long-term projects. So you will see an adjustment. You said Bob Rennie laid off, some of his staff. That's him making adjustment. I can't think of anybody better at predicting the market than him.
Yeah, talk about a canary in the coal mine.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you will kind of see developers try to make these projects come to market, take the hit, and then the musical chairs have kind of stopped, but some people are still kind of running around in the room.
We're going to take calls in the next half hour too, asking you if you are seeing these signs. Are you a buyer? Someone trying to sell your condo? If you're a renter, what are you hoping this means for you? Love to hear from you. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. My guest, Hasan Juma, a realtor with Oakwyn Realty in Vancouver, and former Vancouver Mayor Kennedy Stewart, now a professor of public policy at SFU. We'll go back to our panel and your calls coming up after this CBC News update. Now it is 12:30, and here's Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Infrastructure Minister Bowen Ma says her government made an error in not adequately consulting First Nations on a bill proposing to speed up private and public infrastructure projects. Her admission came during debate on Bill 15, which has been widely criticized by Indigenous groups. Ma and Premier David Eby, who has already met with First Nations leaders about Bill 15, are scheduled to meet with them again later today. Conservation officers say there have been no new sightings of a cougar that was spotted roaming around Saanich last night. Police issued a warning after the large predator was spotted in several locations in the Uptown neighborhood. The Conservation Officer Service says morning patrols turned up no sign of the animal. And Vancouver's Parks Board says beachgoers can once again drink alcohol at 7 of the city's beaches starting this weekend. The program from 11 in the morning until 9 at night runs until the end of September. The beaches include Jericho, Kitts, and New Brighton. And now the BC forecast on the north coast. Periods of rain this afternoon with a high of 9, highs to 15, and mainly sunny in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, increasing cloudiness with a high of 16, highs from 15 to 19 with a mix of sun and cloud this afternoon in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, increasing cloudiness with a high of 18. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, a chance of showers this afternoon with highs up to 16 degrees. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you, Rob. Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Here with BC Today here on CBC Radio 1 and live on CBC TV and on our streaming service as well. On radio, here's what's coming up in Metro Vancouver with On the Coast.
Hi there, Michelle. It's Gloria Makarenko here. And this is the time of day I like to give you a little bit of a rundown of what we've got lined up for On the Coast. We're going to talk about education funding in BC. We have seen school districts announce cuts to music education and other programs. We know some districts are overcrowded. And school boards around the province have been raising the alarm about the funds they get from the province. So this afternoon, we're going to hear from the Conservative education critic. Our Soapbox Social panel, Mo Amir and Kyla Lee, are going to be here to weigh in on the top local political stories. And our guide to personal finance, Mark Ting, will be here with his assessment of the housing market right now. Mark says it is a good time for buyers, but only if you actually want to live where you buy. He would warn off would-be investors right now. So you'll get more details when you tune into On the Coast this afternoon between 3 and 6.
Thank you, Gloria. Certainly a timely conversation. And Mark Ting will talk about housing and what that means for would-be investors as well, coming up on the Coast. And of course, we continue to take your calls on the slowdown in Vancouver's condo market. Are you seeing the signs? And what do you think it means for you? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Hit pound 690 on your phone, or you can also email us at bctoday@cbc.ca. Welcome back to BC Today. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks for being with us. I'm joined by former Vancouver Mayor Kennedy Stewart and Vancouver area Realtor Hasan Juma. We're talking about the slowdown in Vancouver's condo market. Are you seeing it elsewhere, Hasan?
Yeah, absolutely. Right across all property types. I would say probably the most active property type is that townhome product. It's kind of in the middle between the detached and the condos. But definitely on the higher price point in the detached home space, not a lot of buyers as well. Entry-level detached homes that have a basement suite with the mortgage helper, those are still moving.
Okay.
But definitely predominantly the slowdown in the condo space surrounding all the inventory.
Outside Vancouver as well?
Absolutely, and probably even slower. In fact, definitely slower in the Fraser Valley. Record levels of inventory there, condo inventory there, not a lot moving.
Let's hear from someone in Richmond now. Richard is on the line. Hi, Richard. I know you've been waiting a while, so thanks for your patience. What are your thoughts on the slowdown in the condo market?
Thanks for taking my call. My family got out of their assets about 5 to 10 years ago, and even then there was grumblings about how expensive everything was, the maintenance fees, management fees, everything else. So that was sort of like a canary in the coal mine bellwether. And I studied enough finance that I think this is subprime 2.0, and we're probably going to see the actual
2008
happen probably by next year.
Like a crash.
Yes, a market crash.
Okay. Richard, thank you very much. What are your thoughts? We heard the word recession. Kennedy, are you thinking that's, is this reminding you of 2008 and that subprime mortgage?
Well, I remember 2008 because I was at the university then. And
Yes.
actually, the Vancouver market was not really is affected as badly
as the U.S.
If you go to Las Vegas, everything just totally collapsed there. So I think I'd be careful making those kind of predictions. And, the CMHC is a very good guide. They have the best stats in Canada. They produce regular reports. So if you are an investor, you should definitely be paying attention to that as well as your local real estate expert. But what's bad news perhaps for investors is great news for renters. Like you're seeing, so you think you're a student who has to rent, all of a sudden you pay less on your rent and you can have a lower student loan. You can maybe start a business where you are spending all your money on rent or your mortgage costs. So, I mean, that money will go somewhere else in the economy, and maybe it'll produce more arts and culture, more businesses to start, those types of things, which instead of just having it all stuck in real estate investment. So, I mean, that's another hope. And what really good and flexible cities do is have that kind of, possibilities for the population.
So you're hoping it prompts investment elsewhere?
Well, it will. I mean, money goes somewhere, and if it's not in real estate, which has been a kind of a quick payoff for, a lot of these buildings will make 15% return, which is a lot of instant turnover. Rental makes less of a return, maybe 6-8%. Over the longer term. So that immediate money that's looking for quick returns is going to go somewhere else, and it'll be some other type of business.
Hasan, what does that mean then for people who have been, dabbling, investing in real estate?
Yeah, I think definitely what has happened is with the condo market, with where we're at today, the investment has been pulled out of it. And so when we look at, we'll call it a newbie investor, they own one property, they're principal residents, and now they want to buy a condo for investment. Those buyers are just, they're gone. I find that the investors today in the condos, really what they're doing is they are purchasing a condo for a future generation. So they understand that, okay, I'm going to buy a condo. I have a young child, maybe they're 7 or 8 years old. I want to prepare them 10 years from now. I understand that this is not going to cash flow. I'm going to have to put money into this property. The typical investor will run away from that scenario, and that has happened. But you have the family with the young kids that say, I can save for the education, or I can get a condo, pay off as much as I can for 10 years. And am I setting my kids up for better success by going down that road? I mean, ultimately, if they can do both, that's great. But I'm finding a lot of clients, they're choosing to just do one. But of course, there's not that many buyers like that in the market. So, the investment pulls out of it. Like Kennedy mentioned as well, money will flow into other areas.
I know we've been talking about there are various factors, but what do you see as factors behind this? Is it limits on immigration and international students? Is it changes to how short-term rentals are governed here in BC?
Perfect storm of events. So you have peak markets where everyone is following the herds back in 2021, early parts of 2022. Purchasing pre-sale condos, purchasing pre-sales that have floor plans that are ideal to rent to people that are immigrating here from other countries, smaller floor plans, very investor driven that people don't want to move into. Then you have the rates start to skyrocket. Then you have, changes to short-term rental legislation. Now there's more units being put into the rental market. So you have all of these changes happening. And keeping in mind, the people that purchased the pre-sales in 2021, they never wanted to complete on them in the first place. They wanted to get to the point of completion, make their 100,000, flip it, assign it. That doesn't exist. And that is what has created kind of this third segment of condo inventory, which is like the newly constructed, brand new that nobody lives in. And sellers are struggling with what to do with that. Do we rent it out? Do we sell it? Both are difficult right now.
And they get hit with empty homes tax if they hold on to it.
Come in.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to follow up on that in a moment as to what this means moving forward then as to the kinds of developments that we should be looking at. Tim is on the line in Surrey with a question about the slowdown in the condo market that we're seeing. Hi, Tim. In the Fraser Valley, in fact. Yeah.
Yeah, hi. Well, my question may be naive, but what I said to your screen, or I was asking, what I wanted to ask your panel was, what does jurisdiction in housing mean nowadays? Because, first of all, what's affordable housing? Who the heck knows what that is? But what is jurisdiction in regards? Remember, you had both the federal liberals and federal conservatives murder the National Housing Program. They got rid of it. And then you had a lag of what you call affordable housing. Not everybody can afford a condo, and so if you're going to prioritize property for profit, because quite frankly, maybe this realtor or your guest can tell me, does the private sector care about building, quote, affordable housing that will serve the many levels of high, low-income seniors plus young families that are on the rise? So my thing is there seems to be a blur between all three levels of government and the private sector on who should do what, who should pay for what, and does it matter whether or not you're poor and you can't afford a house, too bad. Because to me, it seems like if you think you're seeing tent cities now, you ain't seen nothing yet. Thanks.
Tim, and not a naive question at all. A very good question. And Kennedy Stewart, you know, it's a question that Gregor Robertson has had to answer many times during
any mayor, really.
Any mayor, that's right. What is the role of the municipal government? He said and mayors say it's lack of support from upper levels of government. So to that end, where does responsibility lie? What jurisdiction?
Yeah, I mean, when I came in as mayor in 2018, the first thing I did is went to the board and trade and said, I want more rental supply, and so I'll reward builders that kind of shift their stock over to that type of production. And they did. They were switching condo buildings over to rental. We gave, less parking, higher, and some of them were even able to reduce their a number of the rents in their units through a program called MERP. And that really worked. We built all those all over the city. You see, I'm really happy to drive by one and see. So I know that people are living in there below market. So that's really helped. A lot of the condos that are sitting empty will not sit empty forever. And in fact, we'll be very happy a decade from now that we built all these units because they'll find ways to be filled, which will overall has increased our supply. Really, they're just really boxes and people live in them. And then you find out, you pay for them either through rent or through purchase, but the market kind of settles out what happens, but they're still there. That's the most important thing is building, getting the supply up there, and the market will settle out.
But who wants to live in them besides, who wants to buy them and actually live in them?
I can tell you one right now. Universities are looking at tons of these things.
For students.
For student housing. So they have a building that's half empty. The university says, we'll buy that and we'll turn it into dorms.
Okay.
So that's what I mean. The market will adapt. We're just seeing the beginning of the fluctuation, but other institutions will start to move in to make sure people are living in the units that we have.
Hasan, are private developers motivated to address the lower income housing needs?
Yeah, you know what? It's a good question. I think for the private sector, they're taking on incredible risk when they're putting together one of these projects, right? And so it's a difficult focus for them to focus on the affordable housing aspect. I would say that they do their part with zoning. There's different regulations they have to follow, certain percentage as affordable units, and they do their part. They do what they can. Ultimately, at the end of the day, there needs to be some level of a return to balance out, the risk that they're taking on. And, I think what we're seeing, it was a good question that was asked. I think what we're seeing now is the federal government is saying, we need to take on that role of affordable housing. That needs to fall on our plate. So, I think positive things ahead in that regard, where you have, the Liberals coming out and they want to do a prefabrication model of affordable housing because they realize that they can't really put that on the private sector. And so it's a tricky one for the
private. Are you confident in that?
The biggest thing they did was to bring in guaranteed low interest loans for builders that were building rental. And that is what absolutely made the rental market explode. I was talking to Olivia Chow a couple of weeks ago, like the amount of rentals that poured into that city and into this city from just that one federal program have been enormous. And so, any advice to the new housing minister is to keep doing what you're doing.
Again, the links between Toronto and Vancouver are there, the comparisons. I'm going to give out the numbers once again. 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or you can just hit pound 690 on your phone. or you can email us to bctoday@cbc.ca. Are you seeing signs of that condo market slowdown, that condo correction? I'm just seeing someone email us. And what is the impact on buyers, on sellers, on renters? How do we move forward? Dawn is on the line in Burnaby. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, how are you, Michelle? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks very much for calling in. And is this something that you're seeing personally?
It is. I am on title with my brother in a place in Kamloops because our parents passed away last year, and it was assessed at $525,000. It's right across the street from the university. It's been on the market for 3 months. We just lowered the price, and we've had tons of viewings and repeat viewings from people, but it's like really slow to get an offer, which kind of is impacting my life personally because I rent. My husband and I, we rent, and our landlord is going to be selling their place in which we rent. So now, in a matter of time, we're going to be displaced. And it's just such a frustrating cycle.
And yeah, I suppose it's not an option for you to move into your parents' place in Kamloops.
No, not really, because like I said, I'm on title with my brother, so it's a shared place. But my husband's job is in North Vancouver.
Yeah, no, I sort of asked that. I mean, it's a little bit of the odds aren't there. But Dawn, so thanks very much for raising that and the impact on you as well. 3 months.
Your caller brings up a great point, though. This is so stressful for folks, right? I mean, when I was a kid, my family went bankrupt. We lost our home. It was terrible. It kind of really affected my family over the long term. And the pressures that folks are facing. They made the investment of their lives. They're seeing the value start to drop. Maybe there's some uncertainty in the economy. So what the federal government can do is start looking at those folks that are starting to get in trouble and to see what kind of programs can we bring in to help people maybe, to use your word, bridge this difficult period so they can remain in their homes, not go bankrupt, not have to take out extra financing. And so that's one thing I'm sure the new housing minister will be looking at.
This must sound, when I hear sitting for 3 months, it's hard to imagine.
Yeah, no, it's very difficult, like you mentioned, on home sellers. We have some condo inventory here, Lower Mainland, on the market for a year, vacant. Long periods of time where people are just feeding these properties. And, probably one of the most surprising things is the resiliency of some of these sellers to be able to have these vacant properties and just be feeding the mortgage, the strata fees, the property taxes.
Yeah, not for long, though.
Exactly. There's going to be a boiling point, and it is coming. You brought up a good point, Kennedy, regarding despeculation and vacancy tax. If that property is vacant for 6 months plus, so June 30th, I think, is a breaking point for a lot of these vacant condos. If you have $1 million condo, it's an additional 0.5% of the BCSS, so another $5,000. It's another month of holding costs. So, something's got to give, and I think that's going to happen, over the next several months.
And June 30th, you just be hitting the 6-month mark. Is that what you're saying?
So they look at it per calendar year. Yeah. So January 1st, and a lot of these condos, they've actually been on the market since sometime last year. So they've been on the market for 7-8 months. Some sellers are actually dropping their prices and still unable to sell. So there's many people trying to do the right thing, do what they have to do to sell. So I think ultimately what will happen is a lot of these units, they'll go back into the rental pool as well. So more rental options.
Okay. We have an email from Charlie who writes, I believe what we are witnessing now is the end result of government overreach met with a natural ebb and flow of the marketplace. We are in the perfect storm of a post-COVID hangover with higher interest rates, Trump tariff insanity, film industry meltdown, AI infiltration, eliminating jobs met with government policies, including the foreign buyers ban, speculation and vacancy taxes, and many other disincentives to prevent the flow of investment capital. I'm actually happy to see prices easing and more end user inventory increasing, including rentals, as the COVID market was wildly speculative and unsustainable. I also believe if some of the newer government policies are not eased, we could see much further pain for condo owners in the future. Do we need more investors? All the policies pushing out speculation, is that going to have to be turned around?
I don't personally think we need more investors. I think that's part of the reason we got into the scenario that we're in right now. I think that was a good email in the sense that there's a lot more end user inventory out there, and I've said a couple times that this is the year for the end user. This is pulling investors out of it. It opens up a lot of opportunity. Look, markets go up, they go down. They need balancing points. They need points where we're sky high, and they need points where we're lower, and things will kind of even out. On the development front, virtually everything getting built right now is a purpose-built rental, and any developer that doesn't have to put a shovel in the ground now is not doing so. So this conversation that we're having today surrounding this housing supply, I don't believe we're going to have that in 4 or 5 years. And like Kennedy mentioned, these things balance themselves out, and we're going to be in a much healthier place a few years from now. I do agree with the emailer on all of the regulations and all of the taxation that has been put in place hasn't done anything for the market realistically.
Let me go to Kennedy on that.
Yeah, I mean, in 2018, we were reacting to a lot of, when I was in Parliament just that year, and they were saying it's all foreign buyers,
Right.
foreign buyers. So a lot of the policies that came in was to address foreign buying. I convinced Bill Morneau, who's the finance minister, actually study that. They did a huge study of Toronto and Vancouver, and they found most of the speculation was domestic. Most of it was local people buying an extra place because it was a great investment. So I mean, some of these measures by government are punishing domestic investors, Canadians who have bought, like you said, a second home for family or, as an investment vehicle. So we really need to revisit these things to make sure the policies are delivering what they were supposed to deliver. They have capped the demand, at least foreign demand is very capped, but we still need housing investment, but not the kind of speculation stuff. Places for people to actually own and live are still needed, and I think you'll see that kind of change at the federal, provincial, and local levels.
Jane is in Vancouver now. Hi, Jane.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm a Vancouverite, born here, lived here most of my life, and I have to say that it breaks my heart just seeing my city evaporate to all of these buildings. And I don't understand that why they're continuing to put up these buildings in the face of having this overstock. Once these buildings are up, the city's natural beauty has been scarred. You can't take the buildings back down again.
The city of glass, as they say.
Yes, it's looking, more like Singapore or Hong Kong or something like that. And it's not what we want. We don't need more people in this city.
Okay.
Our beaches are closed because the water has become, polluted. They have proposed for the Jericho.
Okay, Jane, I'm just gonna jump to the next caller here, but I take your point more about the increased pressure on the kinds of housing that is built. Thanks so much for your call. I do really want to hear from Odette, who's calling us. Hi, Odette. You're in Victoria.
Yes, I'm in Victoria. Can you hear me?
I sure can. Yeah. Are you seeing this firsthand?
Well, I live in an 8-unit building, and it's for sale right now. It's been for sale for a couple of years. And for sure, I'll have to move back in Quebec because there's no way I can afford another 2-bedroom anywhere nearby. I even looked all the way further to hope even to be close to my family. My family is in Vancouver. And my point is they're building a big 26-story building of condos right beside the place where I live right now. 26-story, and there's one just across. It's been building for like over 2 years now, and it's like, I think it's like 14-story. So now I can't see the moon rising, that's for sure. But
and you're not sure where you'll go.
Oh no, I have no idea, but probably Quebec because that's the only place I can afford. It's still affordable to live in Quebec for a 2-bedroom. I could have a very nice 2-bedroom for $1,100 a month. Okay, like very nice, not a dump, like very nice. And so we're lucky. It's still affordable in Quebec, But why isn't it like that everywhere? There's beautiful places in Quebec that people would love to live, not just Vancouver or Toronto,
Okay. And so this is something that you, do you welcome then the slowdown in the condo market? To keep those, to push those prices lower perhaps?
Can you repeat that, please?
Are you looking forward to rental prices going down, I guess, as a result of this slowdown?
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah.
And I mean, if they have a crisis with condos not sold, why don't they put them all for sale, all for rent, and a lower price, affordable?
Odette, thank you so much. Thanks for sharing that, and I'm sorry that you've got that so much uncertainty that you're faced with. I just have about a minute and a half left here now. Let's just wrap up. Perhaps Kennedy, the Liberal government now is saying build, baby, build. But what does that mean? What do we need to build?
Well, more rental. I mean, I really think that is a safe investment. You can get pension funds, for example, that can, they look at that kind of return. 6 or 8% for a pension fund is great. And the more, we're talking about Montreal with lower rents, it's because they have legacy stock. They've been building, for a couple hundred years, and so there's legacy stock. We don't really have that legacy stock in Vancouver, and that's what we're building right now. We're building the homes that people are going to live in 50, 60, 70 years.
That the children of today's buyers that you're hoping.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of interest in this. We're going to have to talk about it again, I think. Thank you so much to both of you. What a great discussion.
Thanks for having us, Michelle.
Kennedy Stewart, former mayor of Vancouver, teaches public policy at Simon Fraser University. Hasan Juma is a realtor with Oakwyn Realty in Vancouver. We welcome more of your thoughts. BC Today at cbc.ca. And one last email here. Trevor writes, short-term rental policies is a massive overstep on governments. Homeowners should have all the options available to them. Thanks, Trevor.